So last time we talked about Indo-European, right? This is the prehistory of English, meaning that before there was such a language called English. What was before then, right? So we say that before English, let's see. In 1786, Sir William Jones, who was a British judge, who was sent to carry out his responsibilities in India, right? He was interested in language studies, so he observed that Sanskrit is an ancient language of India, okay? So he noticed that Sanskrit has a lot of similarities, okay? Sanskrit shows a lot of similarities with English and with Greek, right, and Latin. But you know that Greek and Latin are Western languages, right? Whereas Sanskrit is an Eastern languages, right? So this means that there should be some affinity, meaning that they should be related, right? Because there are so many similarities than what you would expect if it's just a coincidence, right? So they must be related genetically, these languages, right? So they are related genetically. So he compares and contrasts so many words from these languages, like English, German, Swedish, Finnish, and so on, Sanskrit, and so on, right? And he found that they are more similar than they are different, right? For example, in this case, you see English, German, and Swedish, one N, N, right? So there are similarities between them. With the N here, as you can see, right? And they all begin with a vowel, like that, tu, sue, toi. So at least in this case, English and Swedish are closer together, right? Because they have the T in the beginning, right? And German has the W, just as English has the W, like that. So he compared and contrasted so many languages together, right? And he believed that these words are what we call cognates, right? Where is cognate? These words are cognates. So they share the same origin, right? But they may look different because some linguistic changes happen to them, right? So after comparing so many cognates, he put languages into different families, right? Just like you can put people in different families depending on how related they are, depending on how closely related they are or not, right? So when you put them in language families, you got this kind of situation where this is the map of the world languages. So you have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 10 different language families, right? Starting from African, Afro-Asiatic, American Indian languages are languages that are spoken by Native American people, right? And then we have Dravidian. As you can see, Dravidian here is coded with blue, right? So it's this part of India, right? But the biggest family of which English is one part is the Indo-European, which is represented by this light green, right? So where do you see Indo-European? So here in the US, right, because most people would speak English, and then a lot of areas here in South America, not English, but they speak Spanish, right? Spanish is also in the Indo-European family, and also in Australia, because many people speak English there, and also in a lot of areas in Europe, right? And some part of Asia Minor, like that. So Indo-European should be the biggest family, right? Consisting of English, Spanish, and some languages in India, even Sanskrit, in other words. And then including German, including Spanish, including Italian, and so on, right? And other languages are like African languages in here, and then pink, the African languages, Afro-Asiatic here, and so on. So what we'll focus on is Indo-European, right? Because English is in Indo-European. So this is the spread of Indo-European. Nobody knows, right, when and where Indo-European started, because there's no written record, right? So what we can do is we can reconstruct the oldest form for which we don't have the written records. But by doing the reconstruction, we know that they don't have words for sea, for example. So we guess that if they don't have words for sea, we guess that they should come from somewhere inland, right, rather than the coastal areas here, right? So we think that they spread from here throughout Europe and to Asia, also Indo-Iranian here, to India and to Iraq, Iran, and so on, like that. So that's the kind of the origin of the Indo-European people, right? And this is the what we call the language family of Indo-European. And as you can see, Indo-European itself here on the top, Indo-European goes off into different families, subfamilies, right? We have Baltic here, Slavic here, Germanic here, Celtic, Italic, Anatolian, Indo-Iranian, and so on, right? So Indo-European is really a big group, right? But the most important group, because we're studying the history of English, is the Germanic, right? Germanic is the language family spoken by Germanic peoples, right? And we'll talk about Germanic peoples today. So we have, and under Germanic, we have the North branch, meaning the Germanic peoples that live up north, right? Norway, Sweden, like that. And then Western, towards the west side of Europe, like British people, like Germany, and so on. And then East Germanic towards the east, but we don't have that language anymore, it's extinct, okay? So English is in the West Germanic branch, as you know, because it's in the western side of Europe. And then we have Dutch and German as our sister, right? Meaning that people who study German and Dutch will have no difficulty studying English because they are so similar to each other, like that. And another important branch is, after Indo-European, is Celtic, right? Celtic is a group of languages that are spoken by native people who lived in England before the Germanic peoples arrived. So this is like American Indian languages, like that, okay? So Celtic, like Irish, like Scottish, like that, so under Celtic, right? We borrow some words like place names from Celtic languages. And then Italic is important because Italic is the family that consists of Spanish, Italian, Latin, French. So people who study Spanish will have no difficulty studying Italian because they are so alike. And Italic is important in another aspect because we borrow a lot of Latin words and also a lot of Spanish, French, and Italian words during the Renaissance time, right? So this is important. And then Hellenic is Greek, right? So we borrow from Greek. Greek is before Roman, right? And then other languages are not totally important, very important to the history of English, even though we borrow some words from Hindi, from Urdu, that's in the Indo-Iranian in India, like that. Sanskrit is also in that group, okay? So that's the concept of language family. And this is an important thing that we'll just talk about once again. Grimm's Law. So there's this guy, Jacob Grimm, right, of the brothers Grimm who collected fairy tales. And he formulated Grimm's Law to explain systematic differences between the Germanic language group and other groups in Indo-European. Remember this, that up top you have Indo-European, right? So how does Indo-European change into Germanic, right? So there is this set of rules, linguistic rules, which we call Grimm's Law, right? That changed Indo-European into Germanic, right? So Indo-European includes Baltic, Slavic, Italic, Celtic, and other languages too, right? So this set of laws, this set of rules, we call Grimm's Law, right? Change Indo-European languages into Germanic languages, and including English, right? Because English is one of the Germanic languages. And so also German, also Swedish, also Dutch, right? So this is also called the first Germanic sound shift, The first, so there will be the second sound shift. The first Germanic sound shift, meaning the sound changes that happen to the Indo-European languages so that they become Germanic languages. Okay? So he formed 3 rules, right? This is a set of rules consisting of 3 rules, and these rules affect only Indo-European stops. Okay? There are other rules that we will not be studying. There are other rules like rules that affect vowels, rules that affect other kinds of consonants, right? But we'll only focus on the stops, right? Indo-European stops into Germanic. Maybe you have fricative and then other stops, right? So there are 3 rules. One is, you see stops here, only stops, right? Minus voice, meaning voiceless, right? You guys remember? Plus voice, voiced. Plus voice is voice. Plus aspiration is aspirated, right? So Indo-European, PTK, voiceless, PTK, right? Voiceless stop, PTK, voiceless stop, PTK, will change to Germanic fricatives, right? These are all fricatives, F, theta, and then H. In the same, notice, in the same place of articulation, right? P is labial, right? F, labial. So the only thing that changes is the kind of the stop to fricative. We call it fricativization, right? In the same place of articulation. T, dental, TH, dental, K, velar, H, glottal, but still close place, right? So it makes sense to change that. Voice, BDG, change to PTK, meaning voicing is gone, right? Voice to voiceless. And then voice aspirated, BH, DH, GH. Sometimes you put the H as a superscript, right? Little one, but same thing. The H, the aspiration is gone to BDG, right? So in plain terms, we have these rules. Voice aspirated stop, go to voice unaspirated stop. So in other words, de-aspiration. Aspiration is gone. Voiceless stops to voiceless fricative, fricativization, right? To make it into a fricative sound. Voice stop to voiceless stop, this is de-voicing, right? Voicing is gone. All in all, this is for, remember, we talked about ease of articulation, ease of effort, right? When you don't do the aspiration, it's easier to pronounce. When you don't stop the air, just let the air out continuously, fricativization is easier. When you devoice it, you don't have to voice your vocal cords, easier also. So the motivation for language change, right? So examples, pedis to foot, right? Left-hand side we have Indo-European, right-hand side we have the Germanic. They are cognates. They originate from the same source, Indo-European, right? But because of Grimm's law, P in the red, indicated in the red here, pedis, right? When you have pedicure, manicure, like that. So pedis changed to foot, right? P changed to F, right? We know that P changed to F, T changed to TH, like that. So this is one set. The second row is another set, turba to thorp, like that. They are related. You will notice that there are other things that change. E changed to U and so on, right? So those are things that we didn't talk about, right? But we focus on only stops, right? And then in the third set, we have brother to brother, like that, and so on, okay? And so that's Grimm's law, right? Grimm's law doesn't apply when there's one exception for Grimm's law is that Grimm's law doesn't apply when there's a preceding S before PTK. For example, sparus is spear. So P here doesn't change to F because of the S here. S is already a fricative, right? So there's no need to repeat the fricativization, right? S is already a fricative sound, right? Stella is star. We borrow that word into English as constellation, and also we have our English term star. Also, we borrow from Latin, and we also have the same cognate, so we use both, right? One is more formal, stella, stellation, more formal than the native English word, like that, okay? So, again, we are dealing with 3 separate rules, right? Meaning Grimm's law is a set of 3 rules, right, that affect stops in Indo-European to Germanic. So we have the Indo-European root on your left-hand side, and you are supposed to think of the PDA, PDA meaning present-day English correspondences, right? So first one is break. Now, we only pay attention to stops, right? So circle the stops here. So BH aspirated, right? And then what else? G, right? So there are 2 stops here. Now the PDF, PDE, the PDE correspondences. The PDE correspondences will look different because there will be other things that change also, right? Mainly vowels, right? So you have to guess a bit as to what the present-day English correspondence would be in this case. So, but you know at least that we have 2 stops that need to change according to Grimm's law. So BH changed to what? Just B, right? So assuming that other things will stay the same or change a bit. And then G changed to K, right? So what word in English start with a B and end with a K that means break? Break. Same, right? Same. It's difficult because we have to use a lot of imagination here, right? Sometimes it will look completely different. The vowels will look completely different. Sometimes it will be the same, right? Domo, you know domo. In English, we borrow some Latin roots from Latin is Indo-European too, right? You know words like domestic. You know words like dominate, like that. Same root, domo, okay? Domestic, dominate, domineering, same root, okay? Which means to constrain, right? To constrain. Now we also have our native English term for domo, okay? But it might look a little bit different. This one is difficult. But now you know at least that D will change, right? Because it's a stop. D changed to what? T. So assuming that M stay the same, the word that start with a T and more or less ends with an M, which means to constrain in English, if you can guess, is to tame somebody, right? Or an animal, right? Same thing. This is different. This is different because the O changed, right? So this one is a bit tricky because you have to guess. But to tame is the same as domo in the sense of meaning, right? To tame something, to constrain. Now, the next one is easier, right? You should be able to guess. ED, there's one stop there, which is D. D changed to T. So which word means to bite or to put in your mouth? Eat, right? So, okay. Next word, gender, give birth, family. We have things like genus. We have things like, let's say, genes. So these are from the same root, Indo-European root. Okay, gene, genus, and so on, right? Origin, GN, same thing. So we have how many stops here? Just one, right? Just one. So in this case, we have the word kin. The vowel is a little bit different, but N stays the same. G changed to K, right? So kin. You know, kin is relative. Kin is your relative. Kin. Your family, your relative. Kinship, like that. Okay? Family, relative. Now, next one. GW, just like G, right? So G will change to K. So what word that starts with a K? K sound. That means cattle. Cow, right? So this is a K, right? Not a C in pronunciation because it's cow, like that. Right? Next one, K would change to what? H, right? H, which means to cover. This one is difficult or conceal. So the word is hell, right? That's the word hell, right? G-O. Hell, to conceal, to cover, hell. K to H, right? Next one, curd. You might see words like cardiovascular. Cardio is heart, right? Cardiologist, a person that deals with heart issues, heart conditions. Curd, spelled with a C but pronounced a K, of course. Then K, again, change to H. So in English, what would be the word that starts with an H that means heart? Heart, right? Heart, like this, right? So next one is quell, right? Quell. So K, same thing, right? K will change to H, right? Which means revolve. So assuming that like this, wheel. So in modern English, it's wheel. Right? Revolve, wheel. But in pronunciation, a lot of people would pronounce wheel with wheel, or what with what, like that. Right? WH can be pronounced HW, like what wheel, like that. A lot of people do that. Right? So where are we? Labial. So labial, you know what it means, right? Labial lips. So there's only one stop here, which is a B. So it should change to a P. So the word is lip, right? Next one, murk. Murk is boundary. So there's only one stop here, which is G. We change to K, voice to voiceless, right? So to do a boundary is to mark, like that. Okay, mark. Next one, pleus, feather, animal coat. There's only one stop, which is P. P changed to F. So assuming other things are the same. So fleece, you know fleece? Like a fleece jacket, fleece, usually like fake fur, fleece. Where are we? Pulo, rot or decay. Pulo. So P changed to F also. So decay is foul, right? Foul. Foul is decay. Pour is flame or fire. So P changed to F. So just fire, right? Next one is difficult because maybe it's not a commonly used word. So reek is the same. G changed to K, right? Sword, next one, sword present. So S no, W no, A no, D is a stop. So D changed to T. So what does it mean pleasant? What word does it mean? Does it refer to in this case? Other things should be more or less the same. Sweet. Oh, that's sweet. Like that. Pleasant, right? Pleasant. Sword, exude. Exude is to come out, right? To come out, to leak, to discharge, like that, discharge. So other things being the same, more or less the same, there's only one that changed, which is a D, right? So a D changed to T. So you have, you know, sweat, right? Sweat is to come out. Sweat, perspire. Finally, This one is difficult. To join, there's only the G that changed. So yoke. You know, yoke is a kind of device that you use to join two cows together, like that, when you use them in agriculture. So yoke is to join, like that. Okay. So number 2, we have number 2 here. If we know that grain in Indo-European is grono, why are we certain that grain is a borrowed word and not a native word in English? Because if it were a native word in English, it would be, it would be G to K, right, which is corn, right, corn. So if it was an English word, if it were an English word, it would be corn, right? It would be a word that starts with a K, right, G to K, which is C-O-R-N, corn, right? So what does this mean? This means that we borrow a Latin term, and also we use the English term corn, right, together. One is grain, one is corn, even though they share the same origin. But when it comes to English, we use two terms, right, with slightly different meanings, right? Grain may also include corn, like that. Okay. Number 3, given that the Latin loans stolid and stands are cognate with native English still and stand respectively, right? Why did Grimm's law not apply to the second consonant T? This is also what we already discussed. Because there is an S in front, stolid, stands, right? So the S is already a fricative sound, so there is no need to fricativize the T after it, right? S is already a fricative sound, okay? So because S precedes the stop, so no fricativization, right? So no fricativization occurs. Okay, so far so good for those of you who were not here last time. So that's what we did last time. And one thing that we'll talk about before we move on to Old English today is, this is from last time also, Werner's law. Werner's law is after Grimm's law, okay? So Werner is another guy who came along and he noticed one exception. He noticed one exception in Grimm's law. Okay, he came along and he noticed an important exception in Grimm's law, right? He said that voiceless stops, right? Voiceless stop changed to what? Fricative, right? Voiceless fricative in Grimm's law. But he said that voiceless stops underwent an additional change, one more step. In other words, to become a voice stop, right? To become a voice stop in these contexts, so these are conditions, right? These are conditions when these sounds appear in a voice environment, right? So this makes sense because if, I should use this, if you have a sound here, voiceless, in this position, and the sound before it and the sound after it is voice, do you think this can stay as voiceless? It cannot, right? Because we know from our discussion of sound changes, assimilation. Remember? Assimilation. So if the sound in the middle is voiceless, whereas the two sounds in between, they are voice. So this is likely to become a voice sound also. So assimilation happens, right, in terms of voicing, right? So just be the same like your neighbors, in other words, right? So that's one condition. And another condition is when they are not immediately preceded by a stressed syllable. When they are not immediately preceded by a stressed syllable, right? So just like this in English, when you have words like example, and you have words like exert, right? And you have words like extra, like this, and effort. You see that there's this change, right? That it has to do with stress. Example, the stress is here. Exert, the stress is here. But extra, the stress is here. Effort, the stress is in the front, right? So there's a difference though. Like when you pronounce them, example, like this, right? Example. So GZ. Or exert, like this, GZ, right? But extra, like KS, extra. Effort, like this. In other words, there's no voicing, right? There's no voicing if the stress is not after, right? So the stress plays a role here, right? If you stress it, the consonant here tends to go voice, right? Example, exert, right? When it occurs before a stressed syllable. But if it's not, but if it's already stressed, extra, effort, there's no voicing like that. Okay, so same thing going on with Grimm's law, right? So that where's Werner's? So Werner noticed two conditions that will change voiceless stops in Grimm's law one more time. And under the same condition, S will become Germanic R, was to were, like that. Okay, so let's see some examples here. So first column is IE, Indo-European, right? That's what we already know, PTK. We'll change to F, theta, and H, right? This is Grimm's law. But under a suitable condition, under an appropriate condition, namely, if it's before a stressed syllable, like example, exert, like that we just looked at, right? F will change one more time to B, right? Theta will change to TH, voice, and H will change to G one more time, right? So this is additional voicing. This is additional voicing after Grimm's law happened, okay? So the stress is afterwards, right? And then S, same thing. This is just an additional step or additional rule. S, just like S in Grimm's law, but if the same condition happens, meaning if it's before a stressed syllable, then R will become the result, right? So septa to sibun, like that. So the P here, the T actually to B, and T to D, and K to G, and then S to R, S to R. So this explains why the past tense of was, which is wesan, was, changed to weron. So because the stress used to be weron, like that. So S changed to R in that position. So you can explain the difference of was and were, which they look totally unrelated, but they are related, and they can be explained by Werner's law here, right? So R here comes up as a result of rotatism. Remember rotatism, right? When the tongue has to curl, that's one of the changes that we already discussed. Okay, so that's Werner's law. And this is the kind of the diagram that summarizes both Grimm's law and Werner's law, right? So for Grimm's law, go one step clockwise, right? P to F, T to theta, K to H, like that, X or H, same thing. And then you can do that with every single consonant here, right? And then for Werner's law, go two steps clockwise, P, F, and then B, like that, okay? P, F, and then B, like that, okay? So go two steps clockwise. So this is like an easy way to memorize Grimm's and Werner's law. There may be other changes that happen after Grimm and Werner's law hit, right? Like the stress will shift, and that might obscure the present day outlook of how stress might have affected the Indo-European. Okay, so that's for last time. Okay, so this is important: Grimm's law and Werner's law. Okay, so keep that in mind. They will definitely be on the midterm. Now we'll study Old English. I have only 10 copies of today's PowerPoint slides. Okay, now before we talk about before Old English, right? Now we'll get into Old English. So for this week's goals, we'll talk about the rise of Old English, the historical aspects, meaning historical events that led to the formation of English, and Old English general linguistic characteristics, what it's like, the orthographic system, and the sound system, all for this week. Okay? Next we'll do grammar and we'll do word and stuff like that. So, history of English timeline, we talked about prehistory, right? Prehistory is the period that before the formation of English, and that's Indo-European that we talked about, right? And now Old English is around the 5th century, the 6th century to the 11th century, the 12th century, around that. There is no one precise, one exact cut-off date, right? So these are rough dates only. And then we'll study Middle English after midterm and early modern English and so on, right? So this is where we are in the timeline of English, right? Now, these are important historical events that led to the formation of the language that we now are speaking, right? So everything started off perhaps with the Celtic people. Remember, Celtic people are people who speak the Celtic language, right? Celtic languages under Indo-European, and they moved to the island, the British Isles, during the Bronze Age, right? During the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is perhaps about 3000 BC, 3000 BC, right? 3000 BC. So that's when you see the use of metal tools, right? And instead of going hunting, instead of gathering fruits, right? You see agricultural economies, right? People planted things in order to eat, and then they keep animals, right? In order to raise animals in order to eat them, right? Eat the meat of those animals rather than go out and hunt animals and so on, right? So this is the Bronze Age, right? So the Celts were the native people of England, right? No English, they speak what language? Celtic languages, right? Remember, that's not English. So, but about 55 before the Christian era, Julius Caesar, right, Roman emperor, right, attempted to invade Britain, trying to conquer the Celts, but he did not succeed. So what happened was there were wars that went on between the Celtic people and the Roman people, but not successful until about 400 years later, in about the 5th century here, where Claudius, right, was successful in invading Britain, and he won, right? He won over the Celts. And what happened was the Celtic people were pushed into different corners of England, like Wales, like Ireland, like Scotland, and like all the furthest corners of England, right? And they lived happily about 400 years later, and when Rome was under attack by the Visigoths, right? So they have to withdraw Roman soldiers from England, right, to go back and to defend Rome, right? So at this time, then around the 5th century, as you can see here, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes arrived in Britain, right? Anglo-Saxons and Jutes are three groups of Germanic people sailing across the ocean from around Denmark or Germany in modern day. So this is, the next slide will show you, this is the Roman Britain, right? Roman Britain. So you see that the Roman soldiers occupy most of the island here, and then they push out the Celtic people to this part, Wales, to this part and this part. So the native people will push around, right? And they even built a wall here, the Roman people, we call it Hadrian's Wall, right? To build that wall in order to protect against their territory from the Picts and the Scottish and the Celtic people from coming into Roman Britain and so on, right? So that's the first step, right? So from this, we get a lot of words from Latin already, right? Words that have to do with technological advancement like street, like metal, like what they eat, wine, and stuff like that, right? That's the first language context situation. The next slide will show you this is the second step of invasion or arrival of the Anglo-Saxon people, of the Germanic people. So Angles from here, you see Angles. So from this coastal Denmark and Germany and that area. So Angles, Saxons, and also the Jutes, they are neighbors. So we assume that they can communicate speaking different dialects. So they can communicate, but they are not exactly alike, but they speak dialects of Germanic, right? Germanic languages. So they sail across the ocean and land in different sides of England. So the Angles, right? That's one group. They land in here, East Anglia, like that. East Anglia, Northumbria, and so on. So along this. And Saxon people, where do you guess they land? All the names that has Sax, Wessex, Middlesex, Essex, so that area, right? And the Jutes will land in Kent, which is here, Kent. So they land in different parts, and they brought with them different dialects that they speak, right? So that's why in England nowadays they have different areas of dialects, right? Because the origin is different, right? And then again, on these, in these different corners, we have Celtic people, right? Britain, real native Celtic people, and Picts and Scots are there, Irish people are here, and so on. Of course, they are not the only Germanic peoples that come here. There might be Frisians and so on, but they are three main groups, right? So Anglo, Saxon, and Jutes, right? Three Germanic peoples, three Germanic tribes that sail across the ocean and then land in different parts of England. And they established separate kingdoms, right? Separate kingdoms because at that time, as you can guess, there's no nation state in today's sense of the word, right? We don't have the one king for the whole country, right? But there are many kingdoms, different power groups, and depending on where they land, they establish like West Saxon is one kingdom, Kent is one kingdom, East Anglia is one kingdom, like that. And they have their own king for each kingdom, like that. And they wage war with each other, right? Always. So that's one of the, so this is actually about the 5th century here. This is actually the start of English, right? Because we have Germanic speaking peoples, right? And we talk about how Indo-European changed into Germanic. This is the start of our language, English, right? So our language is a mix of the dialects of Anglo-Saxon and Jutes. And then about 100 years later, St. Augustine of Canterbury reintroduced Christianity to the English people, meaning to the Angles, Jute, and Saxon here, right? They may have been converted by some missionaries, Christian missionaries from Ireland, because Ireland was converted first. But then from Rome, there's another route of Christian missionaries from Rome here that they reintroduce Christianity to the English people. Why do they have to reintroduce it? Because, you know, these people, Anglo-Saxon and Jews, they are pagan. You know the word pagan. So pagan, or they practice paganism, right? Pagan meaning people who do not, so they are pagan. So this could be a noun or noun or adjective. And paganism is the noun form of it. So they practice Anglo-Germanic peoples. Germanic peoples practice paganism, meaning they don't worship the Christian God. So whoever doesn't worship the Christian God will be considered pagans, right? So Germanic people were pagans according to Christian people, right? So they have their own gods. You know, if you watch movies, Thor, you know Thor, that's Germanic god, right? That's a Germanic god, and they have their own set of gods, which may or may not have similarities or show any resemblance to Roman gods. Okay, so paganism relapses, meaning that once they are converted, it's not like they will be Christian forever, right? Because there are pockets, there are areas that even though they are converted, they might go back to being pagans also, right? So they have to keep reintroducing, right? Keep reintroducing Christianity. And by way of Christianity, what do we get? The Latin alphabet, remember? We talked about that, the Latin, the Roman alphabet, right? Because the Anglo-Saxon people, the Germanic peoples, what did they use? The runic alphabet, remember that they have to carve into the stone, right? Remember the runic alphabet that I had you practice? But then by way of Christianity, we got the Latin alphabet, right? And then they might put in a couple of letters from their runic alphabet into the Latin alphabet. Okay, about 8th century, 731. Bede is a monk. Okay, Bede was a monk. He finished the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. That's the name of the book, right? So it's the first history book of the English people. But ecclesiastical here, ecclesiastical, it means church related. Church related. So it's a history that focuses on the coming of Christianity, right? So can you believe it 100%? Can you believe that everything is precise? The historical events there are precise? No, you cannot, because it's kind of focused on the history of the church rather than real history. Bede was not a historian, okay? He was a priest. So some accounts may not be accurate, but that's the history book. So we base, so he finished it in this year, right? 731, right? The 8th century. And all the accounts before here, he based it on secondary sources. It's not like he saw these events with his own eyes, right? Impossible, because these are like how many hundred years, how many thousand years before. So he based his account, like the coming of the Anglo-Saxon and Jews, from other secondary sources, from Latin sources or from other sources. So we cannot be sure if these dates are correct, precise, and we cannot be sure whether these are the only 3 groups that came to England and so on, right? Because these historical events before Bede's account were based on other secondary sources, not his own witness account or anything, okay? And then around the 8th century, we have Scandinavian invasion. We call them the Viking people, right? Viking people from the north, right? And that's when we have Scandinavian languages coming in, okay? So you saw this already. This is the Romano-British Empire, right? The red here, and then the Anglo-Saxon. And there was a series of wars going on between the British people, the Anglo-Saxon people, and the Scandinavian people, the Viking attacks, remember? Series of wars, many wars going on. And then one time, they alternate in terms of success and failure, right? So one time, King Alfred, Anglo-Saxon king of the West Saxon kingdom, this is Anglo-Saxon king of the West Saxon kingdom. He was strong. he had a strong army, a strong troop that would defend his area. So he defeated the Danes, meaning the Danish people, the Viking people, right? And then they made a pact, right? They made a truce between Scandinavians and the Anglo-Saxon people. And then there's a line between the two areas. So it would look like this. There's a line here, right? There's a line here that separated West Saxon, right? Sek is Saxon people, Anglo-Saxon people. West is west side, west of the island, right? Separated West Saxon from this area. You see the blue here? We call it Danelaw. Danelaw meaning the area where you let the Danish people, the Viking people govern themselves. So they made a pact saying that, okay, let's draw a line here. Let's draw a line here. And then the area up from that line, I'll let you govern your people, the Danish people. So we call it the Danelaw area. So they will speak Danish, they will speak Scandinavian languages, right? Danish and so on. And then there will be a lot of place names that are in Scandinavian languages, right? And then Wessex, this is the Anglo-Saxon area, like that. And then you still have the Celtic people here, Scott and Britain meaning Celtic people, right? So the country is divided mainly into two parts, the Danish area, the Danelaw area, and also Wessex, which is West Saxon, right? And most of the English, most of Old English words and sentences that we have survived from this guy, King Alfred. He was like you guys, King Sejong, like that, right? So he loved literature, so he made a lot of historical records. He commissioned historical records and other things, and also Beowulf, and also a lot of Old English literature survived from this period, right? And then again, you have ongoing series of wars between the Anglo-Saxon people and the Danish, the Viking people. And at the end of the period, there's the Battle of Hastings, and Duke of Normandy from French will claim the throne of England because the previous king died without a child, right? Without a child. So anyone could claim to have the right to the throne and so on. So this is the beginning of the Middle English period, which we'll talk about, right? So you see the historical events that led to the beginning of what we call Old English. Now, if you are interested in the Anglo-Saxon society, if you study Old English, you have to study, just like when you study languages, right? You have to study their own culture. So the society, kings, thanes, churl, and slave, and so on. You know, in Anglo-Saxon society, just like in ancient Korea, there are two big groups of people, right? You have freemen, right? Freemen, people who are not slave, and also slave, right? So under freemen, you have several ranks, right? You have, of course, the highest is the king, right? Thane is lower than the king, and you have warriors, and churls are like regular people, right? Regular people. And then you have slaves, right? Slaves. So you have two groups, two big groups, people who are free, freemen, and people who are not free. Of course, they are slaves, right? And under freemen, you have, of course, the highest is the king and the queen, and then the thane, like nobility, and then churls. Churls are, this is like pronounced like a CH, churls. Churls are regular people, right? So this is their society, right? So you have several kingdoms, each kingdom with a king, like that. And fighting is a way of life in that time, fighting, okay? If somebody kills your relative, what do you need to do? Revenge, right? Revenge. If you don't, then it's a disgrace. So it's gonna be embarrassing to your family, like that. So you have to go on. You know, the revenge will go on, right? Because this person killed my relative, and then I'll have to kill his relative, or then another person will take a revenge like that, going on and on. There's one way, or actually there are two ways to end that blood feud, blood conflict. One is to pay if you are interested, there's this word, to pay wergil. Wergil. Where here is man, gil is price, right? Man, you know werewolf. Werewolf is from that word, were, right? Wergil. To pay man's price, to end the blood feud, to end the endless revenge, you can pay the man's price, meaning if you are a free person, you have a price set to you depending on your rank. If you are the king, then the price is expensive, right? The price is high. So if you are lower free man, then your price is cheap. So if I kill you, in order for your people not to come back and to avenge your death, I can pay wergil to you to end that revenge. Or you can marry. You can marry. Marriage is one way of ending the conflict, the blood conflict, right? And people have their daughters, right, to marry the other family, right, in order to end that blood feud. Women are like peace bearer, a person who bears peace, like that, because they are given like gift to the other family in order to establish a good relationship between two families, like that. Okay. So if you read Old English literature, you need to know this, because all the Old English literature would talk about is fighting, right? Because it's a harsh living condition, right? The religion, legend, stories, they are pagan. Remember, they are pagan. So they practice paganism. So they have a lot of monsters that you wouldn't have in standard Christian stories, like dragons, trolls, orc, giant. They are all giants. Trolls, orcs, tokkabi, like that in Korean. So they are all like giants. Dragons also, in Beowulf you have dragon, right? Days of the week, we inherit all the names of the days of the week from Anglo-Saxon, right? So Monday, with the exception of Saturday. So Monday is from Monday. So Monday. So this is from god of the moon. Mona is god of the moon. Tuesday also. Tuesday, choose from two. This is god of war, right? God of war, Tuesday. So that's why the names of the day in English are different from the names of the day in Spanish, in Italian, like that. Because from the names in Spanish, French, Italian, they are all from Roman gods. But these are all from Germanic gods, right? So two Germanic gods. Wednesday, Woden. You know Woden? Woden or Odin. If you watch like Old Norse mythology, you hear these people. Thursday also. From Thor. You guys know Thor, right? There's a Hollywood movie, Thor, like that. Friday. I don't remember the exact name, but I think it's Freyje, a woman. Saturday is an exception. Saturday from Saturn. Saturn is a Roman god. Saturday is an exception. Saturday is from Saturn. That's Roman god. And Sunday is Sona, or sun, or soul, sun, like that. Basically what happened is that the Anglo-Saxon, through Christianity, right, through Christianity, they adopted the concepts of God, of God's presiding over each day. Like Tuesday is two, the god of war, like that. But they replaced the Roman gods with their own gods, right? just like in Spanish it would be Mercoledi, like that, right? Or in French it's Mercoledi, which is Mercury, which is the god of war, like that. So basically they inherited the idea of each god doing different things, each god presiding over each day. But the Anglo-Saxon people were smart. They replaced the Roman gods with their own god, the equivalents of their own god, like that. So two is god of war, like that. Okay? So we inherited all these things from them. And their outlook on life, loyalty, feuds, transient, and exile, meaning that, you know, when you read Old English literature, loyalty is one big topic. That if you are the servant, if you are a soldier, if you are a knight of a lord, you have to stay loyal to that person always. If the lord dies, you are supposed to die too. You cannot go and serve a different lord, a new master. You should not do that. Loyalty is the key here. Feuds, we also talk about that, right? Blood feuds. So you have to avenge any death in your family, like that. Transience, meaning transitory phase of life, because you can imagine living conditions in that time. It's harsh, it's cold, people had no food to eat, so life is short, right? So transience is one theme in Anglo-Saxon literature, that life is just like a bird. There's this poem in Old English. Life is just like a bird from outside, flying from outside dark and gloomy, cold outside into this room, which is lighted and which is warm. And then once it flies out of the room, that's death, like that. It's quick. So flying out from the darker outside to inside and then fly it out the other way, that's life. Very transitory, very fast, right? Short-lived, because you can expect that lifespan in that period is not long, right? Exile, meaning if you don't have loyalty, people will not associate with you. You will have to be an exile. Nobody wants to talk to you. You have to go out of the kingdom, like that. So there's also a poem that's based on that experience of being an exile, like that. So all of these things are evident in Anglo-Saxon literature if you're interested. So why English? Why the name English, right? So the name English, the Celt called the Germanic people Saxon, right? But as you know, we have three groups based on Bede's account: Angles, Jews, and Saxon. So one particular group was chosen, Angli, Gen Anglorum. So that's the root of the word English, right? So gens Anglorum, meaning the kind, the kingship of the Angles people, right? So England would change to English. So from Angle, like that, okay? So the name English is from one of the three groups, right? From the Angle people, okay? Now the general Old English properties. Anglo-Saxon, when they moved in the land, the land was inhabited by the Celts, Scots, and Picts already. We know that, right? So we have Celtic languages on one hand, and on the other hand, we have the Germanic languages. And Old English is a synthetic, fusional, rather than analytic and isolating. What does this mean? Synthetic and fusional, meaning that there are a lot of endings. There are a lot of endings on words, right? Synthetic and fusional. Things, a lot of morphemes are stacked onto each word, right? After each word. And you express grammatical relations by morphemes rather than by isolating words, by just separate words, okay? So you'll see a lot of endings in Anglo-Saxon English. And then this is the same as the previous point. Noun, verbs, adjective, determiner, pronouns were highly inflected for gender, right? Masculine, feminine, neuter, and also for different cases, if it's a subject, if it's an object, and so on, okay? Strong and weak declensions of nouns and adjectives, meaning there are two major noun groups. The strong declension will have one type of endings, and then weak declensions will have a different pattern of endings like that. We'll see that when we study nouns and adjectives. There are strong and weak conjugations of verbs. You know, strong and weak, regular and irregular, like eat, ate, eaten, and then things that you put, verbs that you put ed after, so strong and weak. But there will be more of the strong declension. In English, irregular verbs, in modern English, irregular verbs are like exceptions, right? That you have to study, memorize. Eat, ate, eaten, sing, sang, sung, like that. These are in the minority, right? But in Old English, it's the majority. Word formation by compounding, prefixing, and suffixing rather than borrowing. So you'll see how they combine words together using a particular figure of speech. We'll talk about that. And then gender, you will have, it's not natural biological gender, but it's grammatical feature like masculine, feminine, neuter that you have to memorize. Okay? So we'll come back on Wednesday to talk about this, which we already partly talked about, but then we'll go into the sounds of Old English, like, oops, why there's nothing here. Maybe it's too dark to see. So we'll talk about consonants and vowels and sound changes in Old English, and you get to practice reading Old English aloud on Wednesday, okay?